So I help service-based business owners. I help them book more clients and work less hours through brand and website design and also copywriting that helps clarify their messaging.
Love that. And tell me too a little bit about because we're going to end up talking about, right? You started your business after we talked about this before, and you started your business when your youngest was 7 months old and your
Yes.
oldest was close to 2 or around 2. So
Yes,
tell us
around
about
two.
tell us about your kids and your husband and your family.
Yeah, so I live in St. Louis with my husband and our two sons. Graham is at this point almost 3, which is wild, and Sullivan is about a year and a half. So they are very close together. It's been a wild couple years, but very fun.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, you told me 16 months apart. So you really know the like little years
Hmm.
together kids thing. And you're a fellow boy mom, which I
Hmm.
love. Um,
Yes.
yes. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So, and you kind of mentioned this already, but you were a dietitian.
Hmm.
And then you transitioned to being a designer, and you're actually a self-taught designer, which I know I just love talking to
Hmm.
self-taught designers because your work is incredible. And you didn't go to like school to study graphic design, right? You studied being a
Yeah.
dietitian. But that was like
Hmm.
a big career change. And then you also are only 11 months into starting your business
Hmm.
officially, but you've had so much growth in that time. But I'm curious to just kind of start us off. When you started your business, you were saying that your
Hmm.
oldest was around 2, your youngest was 7 months old. What led you to that career change, and what did that look like at the time?
Yeah, so it was kind of like the perfect storm of circumstances. So, like you said, I was a designer prior to starting my design business. And way back in the day when I first became a dietitian, I started a private practice. That was my first ever like foray into entrepreneurship. It was super fun. I just noticed that I was spending a lot more time working on my branding and website than I was actually like in my business. I spent more time working on my business.
Yeah.
And then I was like finding excuses to help friends and colleagues with their branding and website design, rather than like, again, focus on growing my own business. And so I knew that it wasn't like maybe dietitian life wasn't going to be the greatest fit for me, like long term. But I was like, well, it's still is training and I do like it. So I had several jobs as a dietitian, including private practice. Ended up spending some time in the world of eating disorder treatment, working at a treatment center. And then as we started adding to our family, I realized kind of corporate life wasn't going to be for me. I needed to take a break from that and stay home with my kiddos. And then it kind of all just culminated in this like, I always kind of wondered about doing a design business, and it ended up being the perfect time to start
Yeah.
something, build it slowly, and kind of grow it as my kids grow.
Yeah, I love that. And I didn't tell you I was going to ask this question. You might not have like an answer to it, but like, how do you feel like not being taught design skills, you had the eye for design? Do you just have you like always kind of known what looks good, or did you study certain things at that point to like help you learn to do the design stuff before booked out designer where you learned the business stuff?
Yeah, so good question. So I have been learning all of the design things since I started my private practice, basically.
Yeah.
Again, I talked about how like my focus was just not it was just very split. It was more on the design side of like all the design things
Yeah.
in my business. So I gleaned information from like everywhere I could, like free webinars, paid classes. I would sit down and break down like when things go over really well, when I like a design, why do I like the design? Like what
Ooh,
is
that's good.
working about it and what's not working about it, so that I can be really smart about making edits. And then it's really streamlined, I think, my ability to kind of translate the concept for something into the actual draft and eventually the final product.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's such a good thing to try to focus on as designers of like when we see something. I feel like I do this all the time with interior design because I'm not obviously an interior designer,
Hmm.
but I try to do like I'm working on a nursery right now and I'm trying to make it look good. It's like when you see a
Hmm.
photo on Pinterest, why do I like the way this room
Yeah.
looks?
Why does it work? Like, why does that look good like that?
Yeah,
And then how can I replicate that for what I'm doing is exactly
yeah,
it. So it's a lot more scientific, I think, than I think some people think of. Like, it's not just like
yeah.
putting the pretty things together, but learning, I think the science of it was really, really helpful.
Yeah. And you have that like sciencey brain from the dietitian stuff. So that's really
I
fun.
do. I do. I have a very sciencey brain.
Yeah, so okay, let's talk about starting your business and when you kind of decide to do that and like go all in, okay, like you're a stay-at-home mom and you're like, okay, I want to start a brand and website design business. What was like life looking like at that time? And
Hmm.
I know you bought Book.Designer really quickly, but yeah, I would love to hear just like
Hmm.
it was, about 11 months ago, so not like a long time to think back on, but yeah, what was life then?
Yes. It's crazy because it was only 11 months ago, but it feels like it was forever ago just in terms of how much has happened since then.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say I decided on a whim to turn it into like an official business. But it was one of those things that was kind of just like at the back of my mind for several years of maybe I could one day want to do this professionally. And then everything kind of, again, just like culminated in this perfect storm. Like I knew that it was time for me personally. What I needed was a little bit of work to throw some balance into my life. I just have always craved doing, I think, having more than one area of focus at a time. And so, my babies were getting a little bit older. They were still little, but we were out of like the newborn phase. I had a little bit more time and energy. And I think the final straw was like, I kind of challenged that black and white mentality of like, well, if I'm going to do it, I need to jump all in and do all these things. Not to say I didn't like invest my whole heart, but I realized like, well, I could just take one or two projects. I could do it slowly. I could let it evolve as I'm evolving. And so that was last spring. And then shortly after, I went back and looked at my receipt for Booked Out Designer. I think a month after I registered my LLC, I signed up for Booked Out Designer during Booked Out Week. So it was all just very back to back.
That's awesome. You just said two really good things of like you wanted to work to throw some balance into your life. Like you felt like as a
Mm-hmm.
mom, like I want something else too. And your kids were getting a little older. Although I'm still like
Mm-hmm.
7 months old. I'm like, I don't know if I could have started a
Oh,
business then. Like I'm like, oh my
looking back,
gosh.
what was I thinking in a great way? But also, I
Yeah.
realized, like, looking back, I mean, my kids are still really little. They're 2 and 1,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we were out of like the super sleep deprived newborn days, and
Yes.
I was ready to kind of mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, and I think a lot of women listening can relate to that of like you, and I know I can, of like I love motherhood so much, but I also like can't
Mm-hmm.
imagine not having my business. But I also can't imagine having my son in full-time childcare right now. Like I don't want that necessarily. I want like a bit of
Yeah.
both. And I
Yeah.
loved how you said let it evolve as you're evolving. And like it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be that like, okay, I'm starting a business and therefore now I'm gonna work 40 hours a week and I'm gonna figure this out and do all these things. Like it can go slower
Yeah.
than that.
Yes. Yes. And it has been. And I have the kind of, I think, personality where I'm like, go, go, go. So I've had to actively slow myself down a little bit. But I think that's
Yeah.
also part of my growth as a person and part of growing a really quality and values driven business is that I do
Yeah.
value that balance. And so having to work for it kind of on both ends of the spectrum has been ultimately really good for both me and my family.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so okay, when with Book.Designer, you
Mm-hmm.
saw a 755% ROI on your investment. Pretty, and that was a few months after
It's
joining.
really fast. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, you started booking clients quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You became a booked out designer, so to speak. And your
Mm-hmm.
original
I
goal
did.
when you joined was to just book like two people for the entire year. So kind of tell me about what
Yeah.
was happening when you booked out quickly and like any tips you have for people of like how to do that well.
Yes. Okay. So I booked out. So I will acknowledge because I do things part-time. I balance my kiddos and all of the things. My booked out is fewer projects than maybe
Yeah.
somebody who is able to dedicate all of their like working time to work.
And I love that too.
But
That can mean what you want it to mean, right? The term booked out. Like
yeah,
what is your version of
ex-
like having the most clients you want to have? Yeah.
yes, exactly. And so when I started out, I had this like really my baseline goal was kind of like I would like to be bringing in enough revenue to send my children to a part-time daycare, also so they can just see like other kiddos and
Yeah.
socialize and get the experience of a little bit of school, but then also being home with me. So my financial goals were to be able to send them to do that and be able to, pay for that childcare, and then to be making like a certain amount on top of that. So we felt like we were getting our value, like the time we invested, back out of my business. And so, it was a pretty low number of projects that I needed to like book to make that happen. And I
Yeah.
think one of the great things about Booked Out Designer is I did not waste any time figuring out my systems and processes. Like I have adapted them significantly as I've worked with my clients in my niche, like trying to figure out what I do, but I wasn't starting from scratch. It was like, okay, here's actually like from someone who's done this several times. Here's a really tangible way to get feedback and go back and forth with clients. Here's how to run the discovery call, which I kind of knew from, nutrition private practice days. I also did discovery calls there, but this is such a different, product and experience that it was so nice to just feel like I wasn't spending a lot of time, like the time I did have to work, I wasn't spinning my wheels trying to figure out exactly how to do things. It was like, okay, well, now I have a really great starting point and then I can refine from there. So it felt like it saved me actually just a ton of time.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, and I can see that in like looking at
Mm-hmm.
how you jumped into the course quickly, and you did have the background of having entrepreneurship under your belt, but not
Mm-hmm.
like the way you run a design business, which like you're saying is different than
Mm-hmm.
the way you'd run a dietitian business. Yeah, so I love too the clarity of those goals of like send kids to school part-time and then be able to earn
Mm-hmm.
on top of that was like what you were working towards. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I guess tell me with Booked Out Designer and with like being in that position, what was the most helpful stuff to you in the course to really get yourself there and get yourself to booking some clients?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think for me personally, so when I started Hello and Co, I already had a semi-developed audience. It was a little bit tricky because, and we talked about this. Actually, I asked about this in the Booked Out Designer like Facebook group, and I got such good feedback. But as a dietitian, I had a relatively large Instagram following. And it did have a lot of dietitians and therapists and healthcare professionals in it. So I knew I kind of already had the audience established. If I spoke out about like what I was working on, the transitions I was making on that account, I knew that I had enough potential clients there that we could probably make something of it. And so when I started the Booked Out Designer modules, I actually focused my energy into the client experience and how to communicate my own offer, because I think that's what I was really missing is like, okay, so I think I can get the clients just based on my personal situation. I think I can find at least a couple initial clients to start building my portfolio. How am I going to make sure that when they walk out my door, like with all their files in hand, they feel so great about the experience and what they received that it not only contributes to my portfolio, but I'm getting that great social proof of like, they're so excited about their project and they're sharing about it. And so I focused in on like the client experience and like kind of the technical nitty gritty first, because that's what I felt like I needed to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And also with adding a course to your plate as a busy
Mm-hmm.
mom, when you're already starting a business and also like the financial implications of that, even it can feel hard of like,
Yeah.
whoa, that's a big decision. And do I have time to take this? So I'd be curious how you balance taking the course with like implementing, I know you just say you focused on like the client experience modules and things like that. Taking it and actually implementing, because you bought the course, you took it, you saw wins versus it like collecting
Mm-hmm.
dust on your course shelf, like what happens to a lot of people with courses.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I'm gonna let you know a little secret. I actually have not finished Booked Out as
Yeah.
I've watched probably like 80 to 90% of it. I think there's only a couple that I haven't like actually ventured into. But the thing I love the most about it is that it is this kind of like living, breathing educational resource. And so going in, it's so easy. Like once you get in there, you can see obviously all the topics and all the things. I did not watch it in order, which you encourage people to do. You encourage people to skip around in it. I watched the welcome module, and it's like one of the first things I think you say is like, you can skip around. It's like, oh, well, I'm going to skip around then. So
Yeah.
I skipped around. And now what I do, I try my best to make it to like the coaching calls because those are so fantastic. They help keep the content really alive for me. But what I do is figure out where the weak points are in my business every like month or so. I sit down and then I try to make it a point to go back and listen to the modules that I think will help me address that. And so that is actually how I've been getting through it,
Oh,
is
I love
going
that.
through and focusing on like, what do I need out of this at this moment? And it's all in there because it's instant access. So it's kind of
Yeah.
been nice to just be really flexible about how I take it. And then I feel like it makes the content more valuable to me because I'm not listening to something abstract. It's like, this is actually what I'm working on right now in my
Yeah.
business. So I take what I need
Yeah.
and then I go implement it pretty much that next week.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Yes, the encouragement of skipping around with courses,
Mm-hmm.
with Book Designer or another course of like you got to take what you need in the course and
Mm-hmm.
then know that you can keep coming back to it. Um
Yeah.
and revisiting it as you need more things. Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I also wanted to ask you, and you sent this, I people who know that I now have a course on podcasting, but something I teach in that course is like to ask, like to send questions ahead of time and also ask the person you're interviewing like what they have to share. But I asked you like, what are some ways
Mm-hmm.
you build a business working from home? Build a business as a stay-at-home mom, and you
Mm-hmm.
sent 4 principles that you felt like were the things that you like have done as your like core thing. This is what I'm sticking to, and I'd love to walk through those. So can you tell us like what the first one is, and then we can kind of
Yes.
dive into it.
Yes, yes. So the first thing that has really, really helped me is this concept of doing less things, but doing them better. Like really digging into the quality of what I'm doing rather than trying to do a million things really poorly. So a lot of how that's looked for me is right now, I don't have the capacity to create a lot of social media posts. And I also found, I think this is tricky because if that's how I was generating leads, I would want to make the time for that. But that's not necessarily like where my leads come from. It's constant new content. And so
Mm.
I'm digging more into the quality of the work I'm actually doing with clients. And I found that by letting that speak for itself, that is how I actually do my best like lead capturing and conversion. So really just honing in, doing less like quantity of things, but doing them better has been the
I
biggest
love
thing.
that. And where are your leads primarily coming from, would you
So
say?
it's been a lot of word of mouth, I think.
Yeah.
I started, my first leads were like people that I did know from my past life as a dietitian, a
Yeah.
lot of like wellness coaches and dietitians and therapists and just all the lovely like health and wellness professionals. And they've kind of branched out like, oh, hey, I saw you did a site for this person and that's my friend and it looks really great. Do you think you could help me with mine? And so it's kind of just grown from that network and branched out from there, which has been amazing.
Yeah, and people discount the word of mouth being like such a great way
Mm-hmm.
to find clients, whether you're new or been in business for years. And that's actually one of
Mm-hmm.
my top referral sources too. Is like people who talk about what you're doing and like want to work with you because of that. Yeah. So I love that though of doing
Mm-hmm.
less but better. So I know let's to dive into that a little bit more because I know you mentioned Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do your Instagram content when you are trying to show up on Instagram, but you are like, hey, that's not where my leads are coming from, but I'm not going to like abandon this account and never post on it?
Mm-hmm.
How do you like balance that into working on client work when you do have such limited hours?
Yeah. So, very good question. So, I have kind of like a tiered priority of how I create content, and it's based on what I think will be the highest ROI in the future, basically.
Mm.
So, I really think that blogging and like kind of that longer form content, like I've done some YouTube videos, I've done some like other long form content, but right now what works for me is blogging because I can do it in such like, small increments of
Yeah.
my time.
Yeah.
So I prioritize blogging and now I'm really working on like my email list and communicating value to them. But then from that, I create smaller snippets from all of that content, smaller snippets for social media. So my biggest thing is I try to keep it this healthy mix of like really teaching and giving like actual tangible value. Like I want people to come to my I was going to say my Instagram or my Facebook or wherever. It really is just Instagram right now. But
Yeah.
I want people to be able to, who like find me on Instagram, come to my profile and get to learn something really easily, both in how quickly they can find it and how I'm communicating it. Like I want it to feel easy for them to learn from me. So I focus on that long form content and kind of let the other stuff trickle down from there. But I want it to all be really valuable. It's like my number one non-negotiable thing.
Yeah, I feel that too. And I'm all about the, like, for me, it's my podcast is like the top level thing. And then that turns into a blog, and then it turns into,
And then all the other,
yeah. And that's such a great strategy that is really, like you're saying, like it capitalizes on the one thing. It's less brain work for you to have to like come up with a million new ideas. Yeah, and we'll link to your Instagram in the show notes. I think you make great Instagram content, and it is doing what you're saying of like helpful, quick, all that kind of stuff. So definitely a good example to look to if you want to see what someone doing Instagram well looks like. Okay, let's talk about, so the first one is the concept of doing less but better, digging into quality. Let's talk about your second principle for building a business working from home.
Yes. Automate everything you can. Automate and templatize literally everything you can. If there is an email that I have to send more than once ever, I make a template out of it. And it has saved me so much time, like truly so much time. I wish I knew. I don't know how to measure the amount of time I'm saving for this. But it is probably maybe doubling the amount of work I can get done, because when I like onboard a client now, I'm not sitting there and like creating a whole checklist from scratch and creating all these folders for them to share their content with me from scratch. It's literally like with a couple clicks of not even my button. It's when they sign the contract. Yeah. I have automations, a couple clicks of their buttons. I have automations that go in and like set up the whole project for me. And then where I come in is about 80% set up. I personalize all of it. I record them a video and then I send it off. Love so that. Almost like just automate everything that you feel comfortable automating. Add the checkpoints that you feel like you need to. Like some of my emails don't go out automatically. They just write themselves. And then I go in and say, yes, that's correct. I'll send it. So yes, awesome. I think just use the technology. Don't be afraid of the technology.
Yeah. So do you have days then where you're in your stay-at-home mom mode and then you're like on your phone approving the automations? Or are you like, I go get my laptop out at a separate time? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So that's a very good question, because I think one of the things that I have realized over the past year is that it's not all like 100% work time and then 100% mom time. There's some tasks that can be both time. And one of them is like approving some of those automations, or even like drafting something like voice to text on my phone really quickly. So, so some of it is on my phone, or it's the same apps, and I also have them on my phone, and I will do those kind of in the in-between. Like if my kiddos are really engrossed in what they're doing great independent play, like I am all for letting you continue to do that. So I will like really quickly check a couple items off if I can.
Yeah, I love that. And I do the same thing. That's a good way, to think about it. Like you can kind of fit in something specifically when your kids are doing the independent play thing. I'm curious too, like when you do have that going on for you of like, okay, the boys are playing independently. I'm going to try to do something for like 20 minutes for work. What are some of the things we just talked about automations maybe being one of them, but what are some of the other things that you might try to do for work in those moments, or maybe even around the home in those moments?
Yeah. So when they are like really, really engrossed, I have found for them in the season of play that they're in, I can't get up and physically move. Then what I'm doing becomes like too interesting. So I used to try to like get some chores done, and now they're like, oh, what are you doing? Can I do it too? So I'll reply to emails that don't require me to like go grab links or anything like that. Or I keep actually the full like Google Suite with like Docs and Sheets and all of that. I keep all those apps on my phone, because copy is actually one of the things that I can do for my phone. I will not necessarily do like full blown copywriting. Like when I need to deep dive, I save that. But I use Google Docs to go back and forth with my clients. And so a lot of times, like I'm in the copywriting phase of a project right now. And my kiddos were playing happily earlier. And so I was replying to a client and like asking her for more information on a certain topic. And like making some of the edits that she wanted to see all from my phone. So it's the stuff that doesn't like require deep focus, I would say, is the stuff that you can do if you want to multitask, if you need to multitask like that. It's the stuff that doesn't require like my completely dedicated brain.
Yeah. And okay, another question for you that's like literally purely for me. But like when you're doing that, like do you like doing the multitasking of like, okay, I'm in mom mode now, I'm on my phone now, but now I'm back to playing with the trucks over here. Like, do you like doing that? Or do you feel like you'd rather it be like, nope, I'm all the way just doing this 100% right now, and then not, and now I'm 100% working? Because I also do what you're doing, but sometimes I've wondered, like, would it be easier to not do the back and forth? Or I don't know. I'm just kind of curious, like how you like mentally like figure out like what works for you in that way.
Yeah. And to be honest, it's something I'm still figuring out. I don't think I'm ever going to be done figuring out, because toddlers, all kids, but toddlers especially, I feel like it's like a different set of kiddos every day. Like I never know what I'm going to get. They have their personalities, but sometimes it's totally fine. Like I can go back and forth, and it feels really easy for everyone for me to be, doing a couple work things while I'm also playing. They're fine with it. But some days they just need that dedicated one-on-one attention. And it's really challenging for me to have the expectation of like, okay, well, I'll get back to this person, this morning while we're playing, and then not be able to. But it's one of those things that for me, I just have to say, like, this isn't actually making my day better or easier. It's taking me triple the time to send this email than it would if I just waited till nap, and my kiddos are getting really frustrated. And so I think the biggest thing that I have found, and I'm always still working on this, is letting it kind of ebb and flow. Like they do kind of dictate to a degree, when I'm able to fit in that multitasking. And my bottom line is like, they need to be happy and safe and feel like they're getting the attention they need. And I need to be able to respond to clients in a quality way, which doesn't always mean quickly.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. And I was going to ask you this a little bit later. We still have 2 more of your principles to go through, but I feel like it's relevant right now. What is a week in the life like for you currently when it comes to childcare and working and mom mode and all of that?
Yeah, so it is, I would say like no one week looks the exact same, but the general pattern we found, our boys go to daycare 3 mornings a week. Actually, only one of them goes 3 mornings a week. One of them just goes 2 of those mornings. So what we do is I have Monday and Wednesday mornings like completely free to myself to work. We usually have like my husband and I will sit down together and pick another evening, like afternoon through evening, that I can work in a week. And so we know like when he gets home from his job or when he logs off, depending on like where he's working from that day, like he's got the kids through bedtime and I am like focused on working. And then usually I get like a weekend morning somewhere in there as well. So it ends up being about like 15 to 20 hours a week that I get to work. But it is kind of split. And then Fridays I use, because our older son goes to daycare and our younger son does not, we use that as kind of like house admin time. So Sully and I do like all the errands, all the picking up. It's so much easier. Oh my goodness. I think this is so funny. This is such like maybe a second time parent thing to say, but the difficulty level, like my perceived difficulty level of doing things really changed when we had our second. So now like just having the one, I'm like, oh man, this is so much easier than when both of you are here. But I remember it feeling really hard when it was the one kiddo. And I'm sure parents of like 6 kids would be laughing at me right now. Yeah. So it's been, just finding that kind of ebb and flow and fitting things in where it works has been the biggest thing.
Okay. And I love hearing other people's schedules because it really is helpful. And I think it's going to be helpful for listeners too. And so you said your oldest is going 3 days a week. Your youngest is 2 days, and it's just the morning. And what does the morning mean? Is it like 9 to 12 or like 9 to 2, or what's the vibe there?
Yeah. So it's 9 to 12, and actually next school year, they will be going more days. So right now it's 9 to 12, which means that thankfully it's like really close to where we live. So the commute time is almost non-existent.
That's great.
For me to get back and forth. But basically I will usually, because they're kids, they get up at like 5 or some ridiculous hour. So I will usually use like the preschool time to get them all squared away, make sure that they feel like they're getting good mom time and attention. And then somewhere in there, I'll try to plan what I'm going to do while they're out of the house.
Okay.
And that's been key for me, is like making sure my workspace is set up and clean, and making sure I know what I'm about to head into before they are actually at school. And then I can just come back and start back in on that.
Yeah. So you're planning your day like the morning of then typically, or are you planning it sometimes the night before? How do you manage that part?
Yeah, it depends. It really depends on like what is going on and kind of what stage of the project I'm in too. But usually it is like day before. And that's with, I think if I was doing like larger scale content creation where you do have to kind of like plan really far in advance, I think that I would have to change the way that looks. But right now, where the bulk of my focus is on client projects, I can basically say like, okay, I'm at this point for this client, this point for this client. I absolutely have to get these things done tomorrow. It'd be great if I got these done too. So that's kind of how I think about things going in.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you for sharing all that. That's helpful. Now I have more follow-ups. I love how you're doing like the home admin day on Fridays. I think that's the helpful tip. And it's funny because as we're recording this, I'm very pregnant, but do not have a second baby yet. But when this airs, I will be a parent of 2 with a newborn. And I'm sure my capacity will grow. Like you're saying, I think that's something we have to remember in like parenthood, that like what feels really hard and insane at one point, like you will get used to, and your capacity grows as with time or with more children or whatever it is. But yeah, for me, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I don't want to go grocery shopping with Colin. I need to do that at a separate time. But then when I have another, I might be like, no, this is a dream, just going to do this with one child.
Yes, exactly. It makes me laugh too, to just think about how like all the perspectives they're just constantly changing. But yes, it is like the way that things shift and my capacity expands, sometimes contracts, like all of that is one of the beauties I think of working for myself, is I can make my business expand and contract for where I am in life and what my kids are doing too.
Oh, that's such a good perspective. Yeah, you can make it, it's not like some static job that like you have to do at this exact time no matter what your life looks like. You can kind of adjust. I love that. Exactly. Okay, let's talk about your third principle that you've sent me.
Yes. Tracking your time. Tracking the life out of your time. And maybe not even all the time, but for a good like couple weeks, I tracked every minute of everything I was doing for work. And it was really interesting to see where I was basically not like wasting time. Yeah. I was wasting time. Because I would be spending all of this time on things that had very little impact on my business, and then it would leave less time for the client work that I really needed to be doing, or the stuff that absolutely had to be done in my business, like my books or replying to leads or things like that. And then it was just, I was needing more and more work time. My family was getting frustrated because my focus was so split. So tracking my time gave me a very clear, objective perspective of like, where is my time going? And also, is it providing me with value that I'm spending my time that way? Because the answer when I started tracking my time was no, it was not.
Yeah, that some things weren't really providing value. Yeah, I think you know this about me, but I'm crazy about tracking time too.
You're where I got the idea from.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and I did that like as a new business owner, and right now I'm clocked in on a podcast interview, like in my time tracker. So I'm curious, what time tracker do you use? I imagine we might use the same one, but which one do you use?
I think we do. I use Toggl.
Okay,
Toggl Track.
Yeah, awesome.
It is great. I just create a project for all my clients when I sign them on, and then also that helps me know from a business perspective, like how many hours I'm spending on projects compared to what my rates are for those projects. But yes, tracking time.
Yeah. And yeah, for designers listening, Toggl, it's TOGGL. But you you make different clients and then projects within them. So Amy, I'm looking at my Toggl right now. Do you do all of your, you do your client as a client in Toggl, and then do you do projects underneath them to like divide up what you're doing on each client? Or are you just like the copyright and the branding, everything, I'm doing that as one thing only, not tracking individual things? Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, that does. So I break it up. I don't remember if it's like a client or folder or whatever it is, but basically I
Uh-huh.
have the client and then I break their project into really broad stages. It does not,
Yeah.
ironically, I found out through tracking my time, when I have like these nitty gritty categories, I'm actually like probably wasting time trying to figure out how to categorize things. So
Yeah.
it'll literally be like, I have client calls is one of them, like client calls and communication. And then I have like the brand phase of a project, the copy phase, and the website phase. And
Okay.
those I pretty much just go in and categorize. If it's like a larger or really different project, like I have someone right now who I'm like kind of beta testing a service with and helping set up some products in Thrivecart for her as part of the website we're doing. So that I am going to track separately because I want to know how long that took me
Yeah.
compared to what I'm baseline doing. But I try to keep it like as simple as I possibly can so that it's not hard for me to do.
Yes. Okay. I love that. Yeah. And I do that same concept. And that's what I recommend too. Of like, yeah, you have for someone who's tracking client work, you have the client's name as the client, and then
Mm-hmm.
you do the broad things, and then you're clocking in and out of like branding for that client. And you could write notes of like, this is what I was doing in this, or you could just not write anything if you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to, and you can see. Yeah. And that's like when we think about for you, because you are someone who like you're seeing results in your business, you're
Mm-hmm.
making money, you got a fast ROI on Book.Designer, and you're like actually paying attention to this stuff. So that's like a key,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we need to pay attention to where are we spending our time, what's working, what's not, and then like what is our hourly rate ultimately? Because with design
Mm-hmm.
work, for most of us when we're doing brand and website design, we're not charging by the hour for that. We're charging by the project.
Mm-hmm.
So then you might just never know what your hourly was. It might be like way lower than you hoped. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
When
Yeah.
you started tracking originally, you mentioned that like you found a lot of things were you're wasting time. Do you remember what some of
Mm.
those things were that you felt like, oh wait, why am I spending so much time on this?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So the one of the biggest time wasters was Instagram. And not actually scrolling Instagram. I thought it was going to be scrolling Instagram. But it actually was creating the designs for Instagram posts. So like either carousel posts or like writing captions or reels. Oh my gosh. I took so many takes for each reel that I actually
Yeah.
like stopped. I like limited myself to like, if I'm going to do a reel where I have to actually like lip sync or whatever it is that we're doing with reels this week,
Yeah.
I have to, if I don't get it in a certain number of takes, I don't do it. Like I
That's
limit my
good.
time to like, if I don't nail like the recording within like 10 to 15 minutes, we're not doing this reel because this is not a good use of
Yeah.
time.
Oh, I love that.
Um, so yes, creating social media posts was my biggest time suck. And it's not to say that I don't create them anymore. It's just that it gave me a lot of data for like how I'm approaching their creation. And
Yeah.
then I need to revisit that because it needs to take less time if I'm going to do it.
Yeah, oh, that's such good insight, and I love how you said that if it takes you more than a certain number of time on the reel, you're not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to do that as well because so a lot of the lip syncing is really hard, and so it's like
It's
you like I
really hard to
I can't get this.
listen.
Yeah, and I've had a few times where I'm like I have to
Yes.
just like this is not worth the effort of this
This is,
like for
yeah.
what this
What
will
is this
do.
going to get me like at the end of this?
Yeah.
And is there a different way that I could achieve this with less time put in?
Yeah.
That's
I love
basically
that
it.
though. Yeah, that's an awesome
Mm-hmm.
tip. Okay, let's talk about your fourth principle.
Yes. So I think the last one, and maybe the core of all of these, is that it's always worth investing time and money into like your vision for your business. Like, what is it that you actually want out of your business? Like you as a person in your business in your life, and also where do you see your business going? It is always worth investing in things that are going to support that, whether that's your time, whether that's like some of your business budget. I
Yeah.
feel like because I have a very clear picture of like what I need my business to be in my life right now, it's really easy for me to say like, yes, like this lead and this project are a great fit for that, or this offer is a great fit, or this opportunity is not a great fit for what I'm trying to do right now. And so continuing to really come back to like what matters most in your business, I think is the biggest thing.
I love that. Yeah, and yeah, you said that it's like what makes sense in your life right now. And
Mm,
that's like that makes me think about how so often we can look at someone else's version of success, or like what, you
mm,
know, the online business space is telling us that success should look like, but it might be like, nope, my version of success is actually that I have, you know, childcare these 3 days a week, and that's what I'm
mm-hmm.
doing. I'm a mom the other days, which means that this opportunity that might be good for this person is actually not good for me.
Yes. And it's so easy to, I think, to get caught up in this, like, well, this person is doing this and I see this really cool opportunity over there happening. And I could do those things, but ultimately, are they going to provide me with the same value that maybe other people would get out of them? Or are they going to be worth the time and money that I spent on them? And I think being
Yeah.
able to confidently say no has been one of the biggest game changers for me in terms of how I'm making like the back and forth and the balance work. And it's
Yeah.
not always easy to say no. I just said that like it's really easy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really hard because, frankly, sometimes there are times, like in this season of motherhood and in this season of entrepreneurship, that I have to say no to things that I want to do because they don't make sense for my family and my life right now, even though they're things that I would love to be doing. And that is just the biggest bummer. And also, ultimately, is going to lead me to a much calmer and more peaceful place in my life.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's a good like note for us to end on with this. Like yeah, that you said that really well. It's just it's about knowing what your goals are and what
Mm-hmm.
your family life and why you started the business in the first place, why you wanted this freedom. Because that's such a thing, right? That
Mm-hmm.
we can start a business because we're like, I want freedom to be home with my kids some, or you know, I don't want to be in the office all day. But then you become like a slave to your business, and it's like worse than it was
Yeah.
when you were a 9 to 5. So it's like that's something to really pay attention
Yes.
to.
Yeah, that's something I was just doing as we're recording this. I'm like planning out what my summer is going to look like for my business and trying to figure out where I'm going to get leads. And then remembering, like, part of the point of this is I was going to take summers off.
Oh yeah.
So it's one of those things that it's like, if you know what you're in this for, it might be hard sometimes to like stay focused on that track, but there's a bigger vision to it, I think, than just your business. It's a
Yeah.
much bigger thing.
Yeah. Working the business with the life together. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, those principles were awesome. I'm gonna like walk through what they were again, just like top level, because I know I asked you 1,000 random questions during there. Then we'll go into rapid fire questions. But the main principles you shared were doing less but better,
Mm-hmm.
automating and using templates when you can, and
Mm-hmm.
checkpoints so that like you're
Mm-hmm.
not doing everything manually. Tracking your time. I will link to Toggle in the show notes. If anyone wants to become a crazy time tracker like me and Amy. And then investing time and energy into your vision for your business. So for
Yes.
everyone listening, like just looking into those things, I think those are so powerful and
Mm-hmm.
really good reminders for me as well. Okay, I have a few rapid fire questions and we'll get into
Okay.
how everyone can find you.
Ready.
Okay, so first, what's a bad recommendation you hear in motherhood and business world that new moms should ignore?
Ooh. I think I even knew this one was coming, and I'm like trying to think of my favorite bad recommendations. I really think that one of the biggest things has been this idea that you have to be 100% like where your feet are at all times, which sounds really like I'm going to explain what I mean. But I think there is this concept that I had walking into things that it was going to be like, when I'm parenting, I'm 100% parenting. And when I'm working, I'm 100% working. And that is just not how that's just not how this season of life works. So letting it be flexible. Like sometimes I do really need to get back to people and my kiddos get to watch an episode of Bluey while I do that. And sometimes I can't get back to people because my kiddos really, really need my undivided attention right now. So I think one of the like worst pieces of advice I hear is like to really focus like and be 100% where you are. And I think what I've ended up needing is like just the ability to be able to assess and pivot in the moment rather than hold myself
Yeah,
to these rules. Like
that's
my rule
good.
is to be flexible, not to follow a rule. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I love that. That's really good perspective. And yeah, because it can feel hard and you feel mom guilt if you're like not doing it the way you feel like you're supposed to in that moment. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
love that. Okay, what's an unpopular opinion you have about design? It could be like a design trend or about like being a designer, just
Mm.
something that you're like, oh, this is kind of a little juicy, unpopular opinion.
I don't know if it's unpopular, but one of the things I wish we said louder is the power of simplicity, like the power in design too, like the power
Yeah.
of more streamlined, simple design, the power of white space, not only like in design, but in your life. But I think sometimes I will have projects start and the expectation coming from clients is like that things are going to be really busy and really intricate and all of these things. And then when we actually get to the final concept, the most simple one is the most effective. Because it makes you feel calmer when you're looking at it, and it creates and communicates the vibes that we're going for. And that reflects out to just all the things I think we just talked about. But yeah, I think something I wish we said louder is like, it doesn't have to be complicated to be good.
Yes. Oh, that's good. That's a word for designers of like, yeah. And again, your work is so fabulous. I remember our first like one-on-one call and I was just like, Amy, this is like so amazing. And like, yes, and simple works really well. And especially depending on like what your industry is, like you're working in like the wellness health space, which we need that to like have that calm vibe. Yeah.
Yes, we need calm, we need like straightforward, we need clarity. And so, yeah, just more is not always more.
Yes. I love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Amy, well, tell everyone where they can find you and connect with you, work with you, all the stuff.
Yeah, so you can find me on all the channels. Well, if you can't find me with this username, I'm not on that channel, but at Hello Co-Creative. Instagram is the main place I hang out, and then hellococreative.com.
Awesome. Okay, and we'll link to all that in the show notes and other resources we talked about. Thank you so much, Amy. This was awesome and really helpful for me
Thank
too.
you. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.